Shambhavi will be talking more about design systems mastery from patterns and principles to product excellence. So I'll hand it over to you and you can take it over from here, and all the best for your talk.
Good afternoon, everyone. And today my talk is going to be on design systems mastery, where we learn about how you can master building components for your design system by applying patterns and principles, and in turn, how your product can excel because of that. So the agenda for today is going to be this, where we start with a quick intro of our design system, how we adopted a design system. Then we'll speak about our rebranding journey, which happened recently, what were the successes, and what was one area of improvement that we found there, which will take me to the topic for today, which is about all about patterns and principles. And then after going through that, we see what we infer from this, and then we sum up the talk. Yeah. So all of you would have known by now that design system these days is becoming very common. You see a lot of organizations starting to build their own in-house design system. And the reason for this is it helps you to achieve a lot of design consistency and reduce the effort in re-implementing common UI solutions. So the same was with Brevo, where we initially started with a very simple pattern library, as you see on my screen. So on my screen, you see a very simple popover, which is just a bare shell. It was not a full-fledged component. And then you can see another example of a model, which is again a very bare model. So we had these kind of simple patterns, but these were not very reusable, as developers had to write further code and styling to use them in their applications. So we improved this and we enhanced our components, where we came up with the component library, and we offered them more refined components. So like you see, I have the same popover, but it's in a better shape with a better look and feel. Similarly, if you see the same model that we saw earlier, this looks much better with the backdrop and everything. But once again, we realized that now we have reusable components, but we don't have a proper shared design language to define what our UI standards should be it the spacing, the typography, the color palette, and so on, which led us to develop or come up with the idea of creating a full-fledged design system. So in addition to the components that we have, we supported more detailed documentation about the usage of the components, how it could be integrated across applications. Along with that, we also defined a standard for what our brand should be like, what should be the voice and style of our brand. So as you see on my screen in the video playing, we defined what our logo should look like, what is the style we communicate. Furthermore, across our product, across all our screens, what are the kind of colors, themes that you should be seeing? So we had a core color palette. From this core color palette, we defined certain semantic colors for product usage, like when you need to flag some information, informative content, a warning content, success content, and so on. But that was not all. Along with the color palette, we also defined a standard typography for our product. Again, further adding to that, we had so many other standards defined for various visual attributes, like the radiuses, as you see on my screen, animations, spacings, and so on. And along with all of this, we also introduced a complete set of icons that could be reused across the product. So with this complete system, we were able to achieve this consistent design across all our screens. So now that we had a proper design system in place, when there came an initiative around a year or two back that we had to rebrand our company. So we were initially called as Send in Blue, and then as part of this rebranding, we were rebranded as Brevo. So how did the design system help us here? We had everything set up. So as you see on my screen, firstly, we were Send in Blue, like I said. So we had like a blue and white theme, and we were instantly able to move to the new green shade that you see on the right-hand side. So what helped with this was, again, the whole fact that we had a design system And since we managed all various visual attributes, like I showed you the typography, the color palette, and so on, we had all of these visual attributes stored as tokens for different themes. So depending on the theme needed, we would load the respective set of tokens. So this theming support helped us to very quickly and seamlessly rebrand the entire product. And as you see in the video playing, it's just the same components, but it's just with the help of a theme change, we could rebrand so quickly. And around 30 plus apps from our product suite was able to achieve this quickly. So elaborating more on the successes, we had the theming support in place, which helped to instantly rebrand. But the support for different themes also allowed us to plan this theming in batches. So we didn't have the whole product suite having to migrate to the new theme in one go. We could do it in phases, which helped in achieving some stability. Not only this, most of our applications are based on React. There are some non-React applications too that we have. So with the help of just the design tokens for the various visual attributes, those apps were also able to instantly switch their themes. And the continued support for different themes, as I said, allowed us to carry out partial rollback in case of any issues encountered. So these were the successes. But what else did we do as part of this rebranding? It was not just a theme change. We also introduced a new marketing vertical. This is just a closer look of what the components look like, which after the rebranding. So when we introduced this new marketing vertical, we already had our product segment in place where we had the core tokens and the semantic colors and the components and everything. But now with the new marketing vertical, we needed the same components, but with a different look and feel. So if you take the example of the button, as you see on my screen, it's the very same button. But now we needed bigger buttons, more playful buttons. We needed more variants, more colors, and so on and so forth. And as we were thinking about how we could design and implement the solution for the complete new marketing vertical, we realized that adding a lot of code within the same existing button is just going to make it very cumbersome. And this was definitely not the right approach, because button was a simple example. We had other components where even the structure was changing. So this led us to think that why are we having this need to redevelop the components once again, just because we have a new vertical? Because it just has a different styling and a look and feel, isn't it? Which further brought this thought into our minds that, is this the first time we have encountered this? Or was this something which was already going on unnoticed? So that takes me to my next topic, where we deep dive into the concept of patterns. So before I start off with how we address this problem, let's first understand what is a pattern. So going by the basic definition, like not looking into it from a technical perspective, patterns in any context simply means recurrences. Recurrence, anything that repeats itself. In the context of UI patterns are just recurring solutions for common challenges that you face or see in the design of your user interfaces. So to give examples of it, you see on a UI, you have buttons, you have menus to select actions, you have accordions, and each of these can serve as a particular pattern that you keep repeating, or you see it repeated in different parts of your application. And we had solutions already, right? We had developed components based on these UI patterns already. But we still faced an issue where when our product was scaling, we had new verticals coming in, our design system was not ready for it. So what was this and why was it? So there seemed some scope to maybe reconsider our solutions better. So let's explore this by taking the same example of the button which I showed you. So we know that buttons are the most, atomic, one of the smallest atomic components. And you have very basic features, like you can click on it, hover on it, you can disable it, you can have icon buttons, you can have a button in a loading state, you have different variants like primary, tertiary, it comes in various sizes and so on. But apart from this, a button itself can have more advanced handling. So let's just look at some of those examples to better understand. So let's say you are using your button on your uh, mobile phone, or you're using an application on your mobile phone where it has some button to click on it. So as you see in this video, I've pressed the button and dragged out of it, but it still remains in the active state, whereas the active state should have been removed. This is a very simple, yet something which is very important to handle, and you need to write some implementation for this. It's not taken care of on its own. Let's see another example where you're again touching a button, but now you realize it's an accident. So you just try to scroll the page and you expect that your touch should be cancelled. But you see the button was active even on scrolling. So this is again something very common that we all must have experienced while using various apps. But then again, it requires some specific handling. Not only this, when you write the handling for all these touch events, okay, for a very simple button, you need to handle a lot of duplicate events that the browser emulates. So again, that makes it even more complex. But is that all? No. There are certain accessibility considerations as well. So I would take maybe 2 examples here. The first one is, let's say someone is using a button using the keyboard. Okay, so in this example, you see there is a menu and it needs to be triggered by a button, and the button is currently focused. Now I'm pressing the enter key, the menu has opened. The enter key was pressed only once, and you see the first item highlighted, or you can say focused. Now I'm going to close this with the escape key and open the menu again, but this time the enter key was pressed longer. So when I press and hold the enter key, you notice that from the 3 list items, this has gone to another screen. So this is again an issue where you have event repetition happening when you press and hold a key for long. So this is again something more which becomes complicated to handle with buttons. Not only that, we know that all our apps are not just used using the mouse or the touchpad. You can use it with your keyboard, you can use it with screen readers, and so much more. So you definitely need to have even the smallest atomic component of yours to support all of these input methods. So now that we've seen all of these examples, which are just very few to be honest, for just a button, you saw that they were all related to how you interact with the component. So we could extract out all of this behavior and call it as an interaction pattern. So now it's no longer just a button. We've taken out a lot of interactions, common interactions, and put it under a new category or a new UI pattern called as interaction patterns. But is this all? No, it's not applicable just for the button. All these interactions could also be applied to several other clickables like radio buttons, checkboxes, and clickable chips, and so much more. So were we really doing it right? We had a button and we were developing everything inside that button. But whereas we could extract out so much and also apply to so much other components. So this was one kind of pattern where it required a more advanced insight. So is this only limited to interactions and accessibility, or can we have more? So let's see this with another set of examples. So now you see an action menu on my screen where it's a simple menu. You have a list of options. You can choose some action. Another example would be a combo box, which is again a list of options, but it offers more advanced handling where you can search for options. You select an option. In case it's too long, you have a tooltip support. You can categorize the list of items under tabs and so much more. Part of all the 3 components, and inside which we compose different use cases, be it a menu or a combo list or a date picker. But what is the benefit of extracting this out? Why do you think I should see this as a separate pattern? So let's look at some features that are common to all these 3 components, even though they could be different in their use cases. So firstly, when you use these kind of overlay components, again, this is something very basic which you must have encountered, that when you scroll on a page and there isn't enough space, you expect your overlay to auto-place itself by flipping to the opposite side. So this actually may seem simple when you use an app, but it's very difficult to actually implement it. Next, let's say you need to open your overlay inside of a modal. So you have a modal which itself is an overlay, and now you have a menu being opened inside it. Now, handling this can get even more complex because you need to deal with the stacking context, portals, and so much more. So this is again one very common feature from three different dissimilar components. Another feature could be where whenever you open or close these overlays, you have certain animations with which it opens, whether it's in the desktop mode or in the mobile mode. So in the first video, you see how there was a slide in effect and a slide out effect when these models open in smaller devices like mobiles. Whereas you see on the right, on the second video, it's the desktop mode and I have a more fade in fade out effect. So this becomes common across mobile and desktop devices, not just one component, but for many components that require this kind of an overlay. So once again, we see another common feature. And another common thing is that once you open the overlay, you click outside, you expect it to close, which is again a very basic thing, but we end up re-implementing it in so many components. Finally, one last feature. You can, as I said, you can always interact with your components with the keyboard. So in this case, you always expect to click on or to press the trigger with your enter key and close it with the escape key. So again, this is a very basic behavior, but re-implemented. And like this, you have so many more features which are common to just these overlays. So as you saw, this was something related to the visual design, right? So we could take out a pattern like this and categorize it under a category called as a visual design pattern. So once again, something to think about. We had so many different components, but we've been implementing a lot of simple yet important features multiple times. So why aren't we creating patterns based on this category as well? Once again, my question would be, we saw interactions, we came up with clickables, we saw accessibility and visual designs. So is there something more? Yes. Once again, let's understand this with the help of a few examples. So I showed you an action list in the previous segment, as well as the combo box. Now taking these two examples further, but adding two more dissimilar components, like the tab component, where you can switch tabs using your mouse, or as you see, you can use the left and right arrow keys. Let this be the next example. And another different example where you have a tree component to display hierarchical data. So keep these four examples in your mind, see how different they are. And now let's think what could be common in these four components. So you see in all the components, you have a list of items, be it the menu, the combo box, or the tabs, you have a list of tabs, or the tree data, you have a list of data. So you can call these as collections or composites, which is just simply a collection of navigable items. You can call it as one whole, which has certain descendants under it. But what do we do with collections now? Why do we even need to extract out something called as collections out of this? So let's look at it. So you can have static and dynamic lists. So you know that when you show a list of data, it's not that you have predefined data already. You can have data coming in dynamically, right? So there is some amount of handling and all of that needs to go behind that. So are you going to do that repeatedly for every component that is of a list nature? Or are you going to try to have a common implementation and try to apply them? If we have dynamic lists, you can definitely have this infinite loading behavior where you can see on my screen, there is more and more data to load as you scroll down. Again, this is very simple, nothing new. But again, it becomes common to so many components that are of list nature. The third one, virtualized lists, again, a concept that many of you might have heard, where you have a huge data set and loading the whole thing into the DOM at once could cause performance issues. So you only load so much of data that is going to be visible in your view. And as you scroll down, you have rest of the list loading. So we saw three important features, right? But again, is that all? No. Let's see one more feature, which could be common to these lists, be it the tabs or be it the menu or the combo box. So it's called as one tab stop focus management. You might have also heard of this. So let's understand this with this short video. So you can see a set of interactive elements. I have a button, I have some input boxes and a drop down. So when I press the tab key, you see that the focus moves from one interactive element to the next. And each interactive element acts as a stop on your page. But what happens when you reach this particular drop down or a menu, whatever you want to call it? You can see that I started using the arrow keys now to navigate and not the tab. And now while I'm navigating, let's say I want to just skip and move to the rest of the page. Do I have to complete the whole list? No, I should be able to skip and move. So I press the escape key and then I can tab and move to the rest of the interactive elements. So this is called as one tab stop focus management. And furthermore, if you have something like a list, you can see that now I'm back to the list, I'm navigating through it. But if I try to search for some item, the focus is still retained on the control and I'm also able to navigate. So handling all of this can again become really cumbersome. And if you're going to write this kind of focus management in a tab and again in a combo box and again in a menu, it's definitely not the right practice. And again, these are just a very few simple yet important features that are common to all these similar yet different list-based or collection-based components. So going by the W3 standards, these kind of components which come under a role called as collections are called as abstract roles. So why abstract roles? We have the name composite or collection, right? But a composite or a collection is just one example. And the word composite or collection in itself doesn't have any meaning on its own. It gets its meaning when applied in more concrete components like a list, a combo box, and so on. So you can derive out roles like this based on the nature of the component and form patterns based on their abstract roles. So before we go to the last example, which is going to be the final example for this segment, let's extend the same set of examples that we saw to understand what is going to be the next one that I'm going to show you. Can you recall something very common that we often do on these collections, whether it's the tab or the menu or the tree? What is it something very common that is very basic that we have to perform on all of these components? I can show you another example where I've added one more data grid here. And you can take a very close look at it. Like you have the same combo box, the tree, and the data grid. To give you some more hint for you to figure this out, I'll also show you this video. So again, the same combo box. Here you see I'm doing some check operations. I'm selecting it. I'm selecting the parent. Everything gets selected. If I uncheck a child, the parent also changes its state. Then the tree, same tree, I'm doing some check operations where when I check or uncheck the child, the parent state changes. Similarly, if I check a parent, you see the states of the child changes. So you might have guessed it by now, right? It's the very basic operation of selection. So once again, a very simple example that I've thrown to you. But why do I want to talk about selection now? So even selection can really have a lot of detailing that goes inside it. If you're doing a single selection, it's fine, not a big deal to handle it. But what if you're doing multi selection like you saw in the examples now in the video? And let's say you have checkboxes. You need to be really careful with how you handle the states of your parent, the child, the communication between it, and so on. Furthermore, if you're handling dynamic data sets or dynamic lists, as your data changes, you need to make sure that your selections are also changing. If a new pre-selected data is being added, you need to update your selections. Or let's say from your selected data, something is deleted. Once again, your selection needs to be updated, and so on. So do you really think all these actions, being quite simple, need to be re-implemented across so many components? Definitely not. And not only this, when you handle multiple selections, right, you need to follow a certain data structure. Your data model management becomes very important so that you ensure that you're not having duplicate selected values. And the very common used and the right data structure to use for this is the set. And again, you can have so much more into this. So once again, are we really building our components right? Are we really making them reusable enough? So This was based on some actions. You can classify them as action-based patterns. Now, you could call them whatever you like. These are not standard names, but based on the nature of features that I try to extract out, I've been classifying them under certain categories. So now that we saw the way in which we try to extract out patterns, not just based on the UI, standard basic UI designs, but based on accessibility, based on your interaction models, based on the visual design, and so much more. So using this, can we do a quick solutioning of a combo box at a very high level and see how much more we can make this component reusable? So let's say this is a very simple combo box, okay? You are going to first, like you already saw in the examples, let's take out the overlay from it, okay? Let's not develop it as part of the combo box. What next? Inside the overlay, you have options, of course. So I took out this option, as you see. But again, the option has your content, some tag, and it has a checkbox. Now, a checkbox is not a checkbox. Like we saw, it is a clickable. So it will inherit all the properties that a clickable is going to inherit. So we divide it further like this. We also have tabs under which you can separate out your list items, right? And tabs, again, you saw, it's not just tabs, it's actually a collection. You actually see it as a list. So this is going to have some common features that your list items also have. So we had that. But now we also have the trigger. Once again, the trigger is made up of an input. You see another tag in it, and you can see a close button. So again, are you going to see this as a close button, or are you going to draw some similarity with the checkbox, where now this also acts as a clickable? So there's going to be a lot of common features between the checkbox and the close button, which we are going to apply here. So now that we've extracted out the UI elements out, as we were extracting it out, I also spoke about the behavior that they're going to share. So when we come to the behavior part, you can have a combo box API, but you're not going to be writing the behavior for all of this as part of this. You are going to be having your collections API composed, which you can apply for your tabs and the list item. You are going to be applying a selection API, which can be used to handle the selection states of your list items for the checkboxes. And for the interactions on the checkbox and the buttons, you're going to use the interactions API. So imagine these three APIs already developed separately, and you're just composing them under the combo box. And maybe additionally, you write a little more implementation, which is very specific to the combo box. So doesn't this make it more reusable and more composable? So to form a kind of rough, overview of how we actually should start approaching the solution of components. Let's say you have a component requirement. So you don't straight away jump into what the component needs alone, but rather you break it down into its view and its behavior. So if we first look at the behavior, it could be its functionality, the interactions, and accessibility. What next? You further break this down into what is the common interface or common pattern it could be put under, and then what is the specific use case that this component additionally brings us. So with that, you're done with the functionality. Next, you look at the view alone. The view would just be your structure, your markup structure, and the styling. So this view, again, following the same pattern, you try to bring out what common pattern it belongs to, and then what is the specific use case according to which it needs to be styled. So you can see I have shown it as layers. Why? So if you take the example of the very simple button that we saw in our rebranding, let's say you want to rebrand or you want to redesign it, or no matter what, you want to give it a new look and feel. You can keep adding as many layers of styling, but you keep so much of the basics of that component as it is. You don't have to redevelop it. So with that, how do you implement it? So I'm not going to share much on the implementation details because this is solely dependent on the developers and how you want to solution it. But since we are in React India today, you can always use React features like React hooks, HOCs, abstract components, and so much more to implement this kind of an architecture. But the main goal is that you don't just focus on basic UI patterns, but you try to derive out patterns in different ways, like we just saw. So after going through all these examples, what did we really infer out of all of this? So firstly, don't look at your component libraries as concrete components. Don't look at a menu as a menu and just, when you get a requirement for a menu, you just think about everything that revolves around a menu. But rather, look at it as a pattern. What are the recurrences that you can extract out of it beyond the standard UI patterns that we already know of? Secondly, we've all been building our components in such a way that it is adapted to various environments, be it a mobile screen, a tablet screen, whether you want to use it with a screen reader or a keyboard and so much more. But like we saw, we can still run into problems where our component is no longer reusable. As our product scales, the design system is not scaling. We need to redevelop. So we are not actually extending, we are going and modifying components over time, which makes it less reusable, less modular, less composable. So you need to constantly keep questioning your solutions if they are really reusable enough, really scalable enough, and so much more. And the third point, this might all seem like a best practice that you need to follow when you develop the design system, but that's not the case. It comes in, and you are going to decide as a developer that I put this under the category of clickables, where it might not be applicable. Then there's going to be a clash in your implementation and with what the design or the designers are expecting. So you require that even your designers are on the same pace and synced with the way you derive out patterns, be it based on accessibility or interactions or anything else. Only then you will be able to actually architecture your components properly. So why do we have to do all this? Of course, like you saw in our case, we are a small, medium business, and there are so many SMBs out here that have started realizing the importance of design systems, and they've started building their own in-house design systems. And there will be a point in your journey where as your product scales and develops, your design system might have some limitations. So if you want to lay a future-friendly foundation for your product, not just your design system, it's important that you're more careful about the strategy that you adopt to solution your entire component library. So it's really very important, especially for the small and medium businesses. And yes, like we've been talking about how it impacts the product. Definitely, if your design system is scalable, reusable, composable, your product is going to benefit from it in the end. You're going to develop really fast. You're not going to rewrite and re-implement simple functionalities. You're going to deliver quickly. And that means that when you don't rewrite things, when you don't re-implement things, redesign things, your product is robust because what was already developed once is just being reused. There are no chances of regressions coming in. So your product is also performant, your design system is performant and consistent. And definitely nobody wants trivial UI UX issues in something as simple as a selection or something as simple as the auto placement scroll and all of those very common features that we saw, right? We don't want all of that in new components. So how can you do this? You can choose whether you really wish to reinvent the wheel or you really try to do some research and find packages that have already achieved this kind of separation of concerns and you try to reuse them as much as possible. So some very good packages that I usually take inspiration from and try to use are the React Aria and Aria Kit, since we're talking about React, but you can have more options if you're working in different frameworks. But the idea is to try to architecture things in such a way that you're not rewriting things and you're separating out concerns in various aspects. So like I said, leverage existing libraries, or you build your own if you really feel it's needed, or use a combination of the two. And what I showed you was just a very few basic features, I didn't show you anything that was fancy or complex, very simple stuff I showed you. But you can always look out for recurrences under various different aspects, because we saw that these very simple features itself they sometimes become hidden. It's behind the scenes, and we don't realize that we're actually not making our components reusable, and we're redeveloping them a lot. So be on the lookout for looking for recurrences in all the ways possible. So with that, we have come to the last section of our talk. So you remember in my talk, I had 3 Ps, right? Patterns, principles, and your product. So I'm assuming you must have been able to connect the 3 Ps and understand why patterns and principles are important for your product. So it's not just the basic UI patterns. And applying these design patterns or UI patterns and software principles, of course, is necessary across any kind of software development, right? So why are we talking about it today? Because design systems purposes, it gives you a consistent design language. It gives you reusable components to build your product UI. So your product UI is built on these basic blocks. So if these basic blocks itself are going to pose some limitations, then definitely your product is going to impact because of it, right? So it's very important that you pay more attention and emphasize more on applying these software principles and extract out various patterns that you can with respect to your UI. And that is in turn going to help your product excel. Designs are endless. Like you see, whether you're doing a rebranding or your company just wants to have a complete redesign, or no matter what it may be, the designs for a menu or a button are going to keep getting more and more innovative over time. But what is going to remain constant is the way you interact with it, the way accessibility is supported, and so many other common features. So you need to make your components in such a way that you're just composing different features, or you're just plugging and playing, and you're not redeveloping the whole thing from scratch, but you just develop that part, basically the view that is necessary. And again, all this might seem easy to say, but hard to implement. So you don't have to do it in one go. You can always do it in iterations, right? You don't have to create your clickables interface, for example, and finalize it properly and only then start developing buttons, checkboxes to inherit from it. No, you can always keep iterating. And when new features come in, before concentrating on which component it belongs to, you think from a broader perspective, if this actually falls into one of those interfaces or patterns that we already have, or can we derive a new pattern for this? So do it in iterations. And like I already mentioned, having your design and dev synced on this kind of a strategy right from the beginning at every step is very important to achieve consistency. And finally, to end this talk, if your product is scaling, your business is scaling and developing, but your design system is not facilitating it, I think it doesn't make sense to have a design system. So you need to ensure that if your design system serves its true purpose, you are architecting things in a way that it facilitates your product's growth. So with that, I would like to end my talk over here. I thank you all for joining. And I also want to extend my warm thank you to my entire team for supporting me in the preparation for this entire presentation. Thank you once again.